What's the cringiest thing you've seen a bride and groom do for their wedding? You know those slightly off-looking Mickey and Minnie Mouse you see in New York City? Yeah. They showed up for the first dance because the bride loved Disney. The entire room was forced to watch bride and groom dance alongside a deformed Mickey and Minnie. And halfway through they switched, so the bride was dancing with Mickey and the groom with Minnie. I've never seen such a strange combination of stifled laughter and horrified stares. Dated a girl in my 20s and went to her friend's wedding in upstate New York. In the middle of the service the minister's cell phone rang. He answered. It was God. God wanted to talk to the groom. Conversation lasted a couple minutes. Then the ceremony continued. Did everyone laugh, or was it meant to be serious? I mean, if it wasn't a joke and was an actual call from God, I think it would have been pretty big news. When I was 11 my cousin got married for the third time. I never really liked her because A. She was 37 when I was 11. We didn't have a lot in common and B. She was pretty full of herself. The wedding itself was fine. Pretty boring but fine. Then we get to the reception. We were told we had to sit down as soon as we got there. Some people found it weird, but I've only been to one other wedding before this. Her other marriages were when I was little. No kids were allowed at her weddings, so I didn't think anything of it. The bride and groom then make a huge dramatic entrance and everyone awkwardly clapped for them as they strutted around the room with actual crowns on their heads. The bride then gets the microphone and hands it to her mom and asks her to say something she loves about the bride. She then tells her mom to pass it on and says she wants everyone in the room to say one thing they absolutely love about the bride. Not the bride and groom, not their relationship, just the bride herself. It was super awkward. Her humility. The fact that she's willing to keep throwing weddings and feed the whole family. It's a tie between my sister breaking her knee, seriously, at her own wedding dancing to the Cotton Eye Joe and my stepsister having her reception at an honest to God truck stop while 6 months pregnant. In her defense, the food was good, but wow was it weird walking through a gas station in formal wear. Please elaborate on the truck stop reception. At the beginning of the reception, we all had to stand up and sing the national anthem. To be clear, this was in another country I'd never been to a wedding in before. So I thought, okay maybe this is just a tradition I've never heard of before here. Then I told this to other people, and they were all like no, that's just really weird. Also, at that wedding the father of the groom ended his speech with what I'm sure he thought was an amazing joke on how it's easier to build a bridge to Hawaii than to understand what a woman is thinking. It would have been awkward enough had the man not also been standing between his ex and current wife as he was delivering it. I wasn't a guest. I was working the wedding. The bride got drunk and sat on some other dude's lap for 2 hours and flirted with him while the groom sat by himself at the head table with a defeated look on his face. This might be the most depressing one yet. Does dying on the inside count regarding the until death do us part clause? Not wedding but engagement ceremony. They reenacted a scene from an old romantic film about two lovers in 1800s in front of like 300 people. Sorry, engagement ceremony, what's that? A way to spend money you don't realize you need and to invite others to spend money on gifts to replenish your out-of-pocket costs for hosting the event in the first place. They sang their vows to each other. Neither had a singing voice. Vows were generally batshit crazy, like submissive in the bedroom, and not asking about where she was going. The auto-tune microphones were a terrible idea. Their vow songs shared a chorus, and it was awful, and they expected the guests to sing along with the chorus. The vows singing lasted 20 minutes. Pure cringe. Everclear, my friend. I will buy you a garden where your flowers can bloom. Bride entered to Bravo hit soundtrack blasting on boombox. Civil service that lasted a few minutes starting at around 1 PM. She leaves to same blasting Bravo hit soundtrack. The mother announces that the reception starts at 5:30 PM. There is no food and no bar, but trays of dessert bars will be served. We are also told the venue is locked until then, so there is no place to wait. My girlfriend and I leave with a crowd of people to across the street to an Irish pub for drinks. A bit of a party breaks out there. We all get told to knock it off and come wait back at the venue in the hall. So we sit in the hall on the carpet for a few hours without drinks or dinner. Bride and groom arrive and enter the venue to an honor guard of floor hockey players wearing hockey jerseys and holding sticks above their heads like swords at a royal wedding. More brotherhood music, of course. Place emptied out pretty quick as people either left to go back to the pub or to the fast food place a bit further away. Our dinner was lemon squares and a can of Coke from a vending machine in the lobby. Funny stuff. Who told you to leave the pub? And why on earth did you have to wait for hours? Yeah. Why would anyone listen to that direction? If you tell me I have to sit and wait in a hallway like a kid in timeout instead of having fun at a bar, I'd specifically not want to go to the reception anyway. Not the couple. The pastor kept saying our Heavenly Father, Daddy God, while marrying them. You know it's official when the pastor is making sure Daddy is involved. Oh, I have 2 exclamation point. 1 point. The bride decided to sing as she walked down the aisle. She was not a particularly talented singer, and she was singing over a Carrie Underwood song, so we could all hear the original vocal track. She finished walking about halfway through the song, and then stood there and sang the rest of the song at the groom, and all we could do was sit there and watch. 2. Different wedding. They began the wedding with the groom playing an out-of-tune guitar and singing to the bride. They were sitting on chairs in front of everyone. Legit 400 people, and the bride was clearly uncomfortable, which made everyone else uncomfortable. That wedding also included a foot washing ceremony, and when the bride put her shoes back on, she tripped on her dress and fell flat on her face. They hadn't done the vows yet, and the ceremony stopped for 20 minutes to deal with the nosebleed she gave herself. Tell me the Carrie Underwood song was Before He Cheats. That's a great wedding song. Jesus take the wheel. Not the bride and groom, but the bride's father. I was the best man. They married young, after she fell pregnant. It wasn't planned, but they clearly loved each other, and it was the right thing for them to do in their eyes, both Christian. Anyway, come the wedding day, I'm sat next to the bride's father at the reception, and I can see he's looking at his prepared speech repeatedly. I can see phrases like not ideal, would preferred not to welcome you into the family in these circumstances, etc. Just before the groom gets up to give a speech, the bride's father excuses himself to nip to the loo, leaving his speech behind. I'm not ashamed to say I swiped it, and then pleaded ignorance when he returned. In the end he stood up and muttered a few words about love and then sat down. I never told the groom, and I'm happy to say they're still happily married 20 years later. Dude, you are the best man. That's the type of thing a legendary best man does. Your friend made a good choice. You were totally there for them on their big day. Invite all their Facebook friends and expect 700 people, and like less than 100 show up. A guy knew a couple who didn't specifically invite anyone, just made like a public event on FB, or somehow assumed people would know when/where it was and show up. They were confused and offended when almost nobody came. At my cousin's wedding, they did the thing where the groom removes the bride's garter and tosses it to all the single guys. I guess none of the guys wanted to be next to be married, because once the groom tossed the garter, no one grabbed it. It just landed on the ground a few feet in front of a crowd of motionless guys. The groom tossed the garter 3 times before one guy half-heartedly picked it off the ground. The bride wouldn't look at any of those guys for the rest of the night. It's such an outdated tradition. I've been to a wedding where something similar happened with the bouquet toss, and all the ladies backed away when the bouquet was thrown. The DJ ended up making a joke about it though, and everyone had a good, slightly awkward laugh. Not the bride and groom, but my husband's cousin has a signature wedding move. About halfway through the reception, he takes over the band/DJ mic and sings this rockin' 60s pop song. I forget which one, but you'd know it. He really plays it up, belts it out. It's his moment in the spotlight and everyone loves it. Except in my husband's family there's like 60 cousins, so I've seen this move in dozens of weddings over the years. The first time it felt spontaneous and fun, but now I cringe as he heads up for the mic yet again. My uncle not only brought up his daughter's ex-boyfriend in his speech, but talked about their toxic relationship for a solid 5 minutes. I highly recommend preparing a speech before talking in front of a room full of people. When I was at a wedding of my parents' friends, the groom tried to throw a decently sized piece of cake at the bride who moved out of the way. The cake ended up hitting my 76-year-old grandma. We all had a good laugh, but we were all cringing at the same time at the missed cake attempt. How did your grandma feel? This is my dad's story. He went to his friend's daughter's wedding reception. Before coming in, the bride and groom had this whole scene of them looking for each other. The guests watched it on a giant screen inside. Looking for each other? Like a film of them just where's Waldoing each other? Yup. My dad said it was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever seen. I know a guy who recently made his lackeys, sorry friends, compete to be his best man. Most pretentious thing I have ever seen. Watching them grovel was so upsetting to me. I really hope when he told them all what he was doing he signed off by saying may the best man win. The ceremony also was the name reveal. They changed their last name because they didn't want to be stuck to their heritage and didn't want anything to hold them back. Turns out they changed their name thinking they could erase their mountains of debt or at least hide from it. Turns out you can't live under two legal identities. Bride shows up almost 2 hours late to her own wedding. Southern California in an open field, no water, no shade. She shows up and wants to get married in her yoga outfit. The groom shut it down, and when she refused to change her clothes the groom decided to leave her looking stupid, and they never got married. Good call on the groom's part. How did it even get that far is the question. The groom sang his vows. I honestly had to stare at the floor and slow breath to not laugh and get through it. My cousin did this. He played the guitar while singing his vows. He doesn't know how to play the guitar or sing. Thank duck there wasn't a guitar, because I may have had a stroke. Not the groom and bride's fault, but the pastor marrying them talked about his marriage and his kids for 20 minutes. He was obviously going for something of showing what marriage will be like, but he full up was talking about how his daughter, Kelsey, learned to walk this way, and his other daughter's first words were this and that he and his wife make love throughout the house, because that's what you do when in love, etc. Bride and groom had to stand there holding hands for 20 minutes right in front of him as the other 150 of us had to listen about his sex life and his kids. Bride takes 3 hours to appear. After the ceremony, she and her spouse go up in an air balloon. The marriage did not last a year. Well, aside from the 2 hours late part, that could be cool. So one of the 3 hours counts as the normal lateness quota? I was at a wedding when I was 8, and instead of the bride and groom getting up to make their speech thanking everyone, they had done like an awards show. So the DJ opened up an envelope, announced their names. They were handed an award statue, a Barbie and Ken doll, and proceeded to thank everyone in the form of an award speech. In the right hands, it would have been funny, but the bride and groom are incredibly shy by nature, so it was just awkward. I'm in my 30s now, and I still remember this. That sounds oddly cute, actually, but definitely cringeworthy. I think they were sort of forced into doing it, because the bride and groom definitely wouldn't have done it themselves. Like I said, with the right couple it would have been funny. My wife and I don't dance, so we hadn't danced together before our wedding dance. Loved it, but it was cringeworthy. We did 10 dance lessons which helped, but it was still cringe. I used to videotape weddings, so I've seen it all. This one couple from New Jersey were the spitting image of Snooki and JWoww's ex-husband, Roger. They were super into appearances and very over-the-top gaudy. During their church ceremony, they had their very white 60-years-old uncle, with Native American feathers tied into his hair, stand up and chant around the church giving what I can only assume was some kind of blessing. It was so weird and out of place. I assume they wanted to seem deep during their ceremony. They mixed colored sand together in a vase too, requiring every attendee to bring a date because she didn't want sad, lonely people on her day. Not my friends luckily, but pretended to be a friend's date because she really wanted to see her cousin get married. Hey, Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.